for the Thursday Hickory Rotary Club. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My country 'tis a big sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
John Bates has our invocation.
Let us pray. Father, we praise you and give you thanks. We thank you for the changing of the seasons, that we're warmer than some people and then later on we will be cooler than others. We thank you for the opportunities you give us to serve, to have friends, to work together, and to find ways to bring about peace in this world. Amen.
Amen. Alan Finley has our song today.
If you will direct your attention to page 2, the inside front cover of Rotary's book. It clearly shows you that if you're ever in a sleigh and you're going to Grandma's house, you cannot talk on your cell phone. Or Chief Lucas will throw you in the pokey. Okay, here we go.
To grandmother's house we go. The horse goes away to carry the sleigh through wine and drifted snow. Over the river and through the woods, oh how the wind does blow. It stings the toes and bites the nose as over the ground we go.
Well done, Brian.
Okay, Tony Reed has our visiting Rotarians.
We have 4 visitors today. We have from Lake Hickory, Floyd Lucas, Steve Snyder, and Jay Tate. And from Catawba Valley, we have Mark Childers.
Okay, welcome. Thanks for making up. How about other visitors? Down the right side, John?
President David, fellow Rotarians, I'm happy to have with me as my guest Steve Bender. Steve is new to Hickory. He operates 5 Wells Fargo advisor offices, including the one that's near my office right across the way here. Moved here from Morgantown, West Virginia, and we hope we keep him.
Yeah. Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Please. Can see who you were.
Okay.
West Virginia.
I have with me today Cheryl Yunt, who's actually here with Mark Childers, and they both they are the owners of Classic Home Renovations in Hickory and on 29th Avenue, and they have about all my money from this summer because they did a lot of renovations for me. And I'm also glad to have again with me my daughter Amy Baheeler, who works for AAA Moving. Thank you.
Okay, how about down the middle? Steve.
My guest is Marina Fabreau. Marina is from Ukraine, but has lived here for many years, and you probably read her article in the paper on Sunday, Marina's Taste of Europe. Fine establishment, gourmet European foods on 127 across from Village Inn Pizza. Visit.
You bringing samples with you, Maria? Okay, Anybody else down the middle? Okay, left side. Anybody down the left? Okay, Charles.
President David, I'm pleased to have as my guest the daughter of our speaker, Holly Bradsher from Greenville, North Carolina, my wife, Elaine, and my friend Jim Correll, who has a special relationship to the subject of our program as well as the speaker. So Jim's a guest also.
Okay, great. Any other visitors? Okay, Neil.
President David, I also have a guest, the truly lovely, my gatekeeper at Lenore Ryan John, Donna Smith. Donna's role today will be to hand each one of you that are in the room today, and she'll be stationed right here, 2 complimentary tickets. If you know you're going to be out of town, take the 2 complimentary tickets, and sometime this afternoon or tomorrow before you depart, or whatever your conflict might be, you put them in the hands, Peter, of somebody that you know that will use them. We've been talking for now the 3rd week about pursuit of perfection. This has somewhat to do with Lenore Ryan, but it has to do with all of us, because I learned a long time ago that perfection turns all heads. Whatever your practice, whether you're in medicine or business of a college or whatever you may be doing, he or she. And we are poised on the brink of perfection to go 11-0 and undefeated for the regular season. The real reason that brings attention to you, Charlie, is because the national media will now pivot and turn its attention to Hickory, North Carolina, and Lenore Ryan, and the team that is currently ranked 3 in America out of 25, 2 at the end of last year, and we were the national finalists in Division II, and by George, we are in pursuit of the ring. So thank you all, and go Rotary.
Okay, hope we can have a big presence and everybody bring guests as well. So, big day at Lenore Ryan. Okay, there will be a board meeting next week. Our next board meeting is on the 18th, Tuesday at 4 o'clock at the crossings at Holler Mill. So everyone is, board is required to be there, and everybody else is welcome to be there. Bell ringing. We're starting the sign-ups on that. That is the December 12th and 19th. And if you look at your calendars, that's less than a month away now. So, believe it or not. Now, we're going to fill these darn slots up this year without the problems that we've had in the past. So, if you're down with somebody else, you got to take another slot, you know, unless these things get filled in the first 2 weeks. So you people that are teaming up, take 2 hours, okay? It's pretty easy. If we don't fill all the slots up, you got to take one on your own. So that's not hard to do. So we need to fill all these slots up, and we don't want Jeff to be over here begging and everything every single week, and then he and his family having to take a bunch of slots at the last minute and having to scramble and get interact with people. It's just not right. This is a big project for us. It's really simple, and you know, it takes an hour of your time plus a little bit of time to get there and back. So just remember that we're going to fill that up. I've talked about this before, and so now it's here. So you were warned. Okay, I just found out also that Friends of Hickory is going to have a sort of an announcement event on January the 8th. They're getting feedback. Lamar and Guy have been working really hard on this, and we really appreciate all the work they've done. And so there's still time. If you want a copy of that, let Guy or Lamar know, and they can get you a copy, I'm sure. And we're getting comments and trying to fine-tune that and trying to get that approved by the board by the end of the year, because we'll need to take 3 or 4 months to get it implemented before Mark starts finalizing his committees and that sort of thing. So strategic plan is coming along. Okay, this is Foundation Month, as we kicked off last week with Ed Wolkoff, and Robert Johnson is up next, going to talk to us a little bit more about the foundation.
Hold the applause, please. Well, it's still November, and it's still Rotary Foundation Month. If you recall last week, we had Mr. Ed Walcott here, who is the current chairman of the Rotary Foundation in District 7670. And I thought he had a nice message to bring. And what I have to say is somewhat of a follow-up plus something else. And kind of tie these two things together I have in mind. Let me give you several acronyms in case I happen to say one, you'll understand what it is. Everyone knows what PHF is. That's a Paul Harris Fellow, which is emblematic of giving $1,000 during their lifetime to the Rotary Foundation. PHF plus one, double it, is emblematic of giving $2,000 during a lifetime to the Rotary Foundation. PHSM is a Paul Harris Sustaining Member. And that is a person who is contributing $50 every 6 months or $100 a year to the Rotary Foundation. The last acronym is EREY, which is used by the Rotary Foundation, and it means every Rotarian every year. And EREY is a status that we have not been able to obtain as of yet through the Rotary Foundation. And that was part of the thrust of Ed's remarks last Thursday. For us to do that, our club would have to, they take all the money that's contributed to the Rotary Foundation during the year, and if it equals out $100 per capita, then we qualify for EREY. And if you recall from Ed's remarks last time, they've started something new that I was not even aware of. In fact, I think I understand it. But the Rotary Foundation is starting a program whereby we would be able to receive back monies, some monies that we contribute to the foundation through grants. These grants would be used for projects that we choose, that the Rotary Club chooses. And in order to qualify for these grants, we have to be an EREY club. And we probably, last year, we were probably 80% of the way toward it, but we're not there. And I wanted to ask you to consider, some of you, even some of you that are Paul Harris Fellows, are no longer sustaining members, and we need you. We need your help. And it's going to be a team effort if we're able to qualify for any of these grants that we can use. Let me turn to, excuse me, let me turn to a different topic. And I had it printed in the spoke last week, and I'll review it again. But through the end of January, we have what's called a dollar for dollar program for the Rotary Foundation. Simply stated, any monies that you would contribute toward a Paul Harris Fellowship, the Hickory Rotary Club will match that. Let me give you an example of how it works. And a Paul Harris Sustaining Member can be either a Paul Harris Fellow or not. Anybody can do this. If you have, say, $500 you've contributed toward the Rotary Foundation that's unallocated, that leaves a balance of $500 for a Paul Harris Fellowship. If you would write us a check for $250, Hickory Rotary Club matches it with $250, and that gives $1,000 necessary for a Paul Harris Fellowship. For those of you who are already Paul Harris Fellows, and let's say during your lifetime you're given $1,500, the same thing would apply, except you would not be named another Paul Harris Fellow. You would be a PHF +1, but you could name any person, a spouse, a friend, a business associate, a pastor, anyone, as a Paul Harris Fellow. And this is something that we hatched up about 3 or 4 years ago, and it worked real well. And it seems like the district is starting to do that now. Anyway, if you have an interest in this, please see me at any time, and I'll tell you what your status is with the Rotary Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm assuming if you can name your pastor, you could also name your bookie as a Paul Harris Fellow. Anybody you wanted to. So, no limit on that. Along those lines, the foundation dinner was held in Asheville last Saturday, and Lynn Lair was our club representative there, and she reported to me that it was a nice deal, and Ann Matthews was the speaker, who was really a dynamic speaker, who is a RI vice president, and a lot of people think she will be the first woman RI president. That's not been yet, that she's really a dynamic person and really involved in the foundation. And so that was great. And also, Lynn wants to point out that the district gave $25,000 to the foundation for polio plus. Then that $25,000 was doubled by the World Relief Fund of RI, and then Bill Gates is matching everything that RI gives. So that $25,000 became $100,000. So you see, it's important. Every dollar that you give makes a big difference, and so we want to try to attain that every Rotarian every year in some way. Give something, if it's $10, to the foundation, and then that helps us. If we can get to that $100 per capita, then that allows us to apply for grants, which we have not been eligible for before, and they are matched. So, you know, the $2,500 that you have gets matched, and it balloons up too. So, really important stuff. On next Wednesday, there'll be a celebration of 100 years of Rotary in Western North Carolina. That is also in Asheville. Wednesday, there's a dinner that the RI president-elect will be there. And this is pretty impressive that, you know, we get the president-elect of RI here. So there are some of us going. We've got a carload going. The car's not full yet, and we can add some more people. Just let me know. You have to register yourself on DACDB. We can help you with that if you need to know how to do that. Just let us know. We'll be leaving around 4:30. It starts at 5:30, dinner's at 7, and get a chance to talk to the RI president-elect. And the club will pick up your dinner fee for that, so no cost. Okay, Alan Finley has our Rotary moment.
President David, can I ask one thing?
Yes.
Can you mention what Billy Black did for that scene? Because I thought it was worthy. Before we clap for Alan.
Yeah, hold the applause for Alan for just a second. Yeah, thank you for pointing out. I actually had that down. I forgot to read it. Billy Black is the incoming district governor, and she and her husband donated. It was announced at this dinner that they donated $250,000 to the foundation. So pretty impressive and dedicated. Thank you. Now,
Hi, is everybody full of glee today? Feeling good? Leaves are beautiful. Everybody's in a good mood. Everybody but John Rambo. John Rambo fell down in Atlanta and rammed his head into the sidewalk. He's going to be okay, but he's got some stitches. So I'm pinch hitting for John Rambo today for Sunshine. Sunshine. We have some birthdays today. It says here that Ann Williams is 17. It says here that Bob Schaffner is 17. It says here that...
That's on the 17th.
Oh, it's on the 17th. Oh. Good thing I'm not the president of the club anymore. And Doug Rongo is 18, or he's born on the 18th of November. Doug Rongo. So anyway, the health of the club I think is good. Other than that, I did see some cracking paint on some of the gutters as I walked in, but I think the health of the club is good. Other than that, if you're looking for something fun to do this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the Salt Block Auditorium located halfway between Miami and New York City, right here in Hickory, North Carolina, The Wizard of Oz. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that or not, but it's a great play about, well, I won't go into that. It's about a fictitious man named Oz that tells a bunch of lies, but the play is directed by Molly Bass, the daughter of Rosemary. Rosemary, where are you? Are you? And I understand that the Glinda the Good Witch is really, really good. So if you're looking for something to do. Okay, quickly now. I know we're running out of time. Dave's up here whispering, get on with it, get on with it. There was an old man in Louisiana who had a large farm. And on his large farm, he had a large pond. And it was shaped perfectly for swimming. So he put up some horseshoe things and some umbrellas and some chairs and planted some apple trees, planted some peach trees, made it really, really nice. And he hadn't been down there in a while, so he grabbed a bucket one day to go down and get some fruit from his trees and to check on the pond. He hadn't been there in a while, and as he got closer, he heard some frolicking. He heard some gleeful sounds from young ladies that were down there telling jokes and just having a good time. And as he got closer, he noticed they were skinny dipping in his pond. And when they saw him, of course, they dove into the deep end and got out of the way, and one lady shouts out, and she says, "We're not getting out of this pond until you leave here." And he said, "Well, I'm not here to see you swimming naked. I'm not here to see you naked getting out of the pond." Grabbed his bucket and he said, "I'm here to feed the alligator."
Okay, thank you, Al. And the reason he was pumping the Good Witch is because that is played by Madeline Finley. So be sure to catch that show. And we can't go a week without talking about Rotarian Idol. So the 30 or 40 of you that are on that committee and got your assignments last week, persevere and start getting those ads coming in. Anybody else, if you have places you can get an ad, if you know a group that would like to have tickets that we can sponsor, or if you know of any partners that we can come up with to help sponsor this so that we can continue to give money to our community. So Rotarian Idol, it's going to be every week until March 14th. Okay, Charles Young has a program.
Because of time constraints, we're going to call off the program this week, and we'll have it next week. Not really. Not really. I got to move along introducing the program, but I'm worried. Is that back table? Is it okay? Without? Okay, all right, good. I was worried. That makes me feel a lot better. I was worried about y'all. Sometimes they can't find a way to eat without me being back there. Our program today is about a guy named Horace Albert Bones McKinney. He's the funniest man I've ever known in my life, and he was a friend, and I miss him till this day because anybody can make you laugh. I love somebody who can make you laugh, and Bonesy could make you laugh. You could start laughing just looking at him. Looked like Ichabod Crane should, I guess. But our speaker has written a book entitled Bones, and I've read it. And it captures the old rascal about as good as it could be done. And Bonesy, I mean, like I say, I thought I knew him fairly well, but he did some things that I didn't realize, accomplishments. And I was thinking back this morning that we were trying to get Red Auerbach, that used to coach the Celtics, down here to speak, and Bones gave me a phone number and said he thought I could get him there. And I called the number, and Red Auerbach answered the phone, and he couldn't come, but he spent 20 or 30 minutes telling me what a great guy Bones McKinney was. But Bonesy, a lot of people knew Bonesy. But Beth Bradsher has written books about North Carolina events and people. She started about the head baseball coach at East Carolina that died with Lou Gehrig's disease. Then she wrote about the Dixie Classic, Steve Mull, that was founded by Everett Case, when he was coach at NC State. And now she's written this good book about Bonesy, and she's here to tell us a little bit. And she's driven up here from Greenville. She's brought some books that'll make ideal Christmas presents. You don't even have to shop anymore. Beth Bradsher.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles. I had the privilege when I was doing research for this book of getting to drive up and interview Charles and Jim Carell about their friendship with Bones, and that added so much because Bones actually did live here in Hickory for a number of years and made a lot of great friendships during his time here and left a great legacy. It's really a treat. I was just thinking about it to be here speaking on college basketball season eve. Does anybody have that on their calendar? The season kicks off tomorrow. I don't know if you're as excited as I am, but it truly is the most wonderful time of the year for sports fans in North Carolina. And so it's a great time to talk about Bones because of what he meant to the game of college basketball in this state, and really, I believe, the game of basketball throughout the nation. Bones once wrote this about himself: "I plead guilty to driving through life at about 80 miles an hour, drinking 60,000 Pepsi Colas, smoking some 2 million cigarettes, and threatening the lives of several hundred referees." I was so intrigued by that description, I had included it in my previous book about the Dixie Classic, but I couldn't quite let go of Bones because he was so fascinating to me. And people would say, "What are you going to write about next?" And I kept thinking, I'd really like to capture this man's life in its entirety. There's so much to it. I knew there was more than what I knew. I had, heard stories when I was doing the previous book. And so I went about the process of trying to get to know his kids and to get their permission because I wasn't going to do a book about him without them being on board. Bones has 6 children. 5 of them live in North Carolina. And so I was able to get in touch with his kids. It took a little bit of doing, but I became great friends with some of his children, and they've been on board through this process. One of my favorite moments as the book was being produced, I was done with the research and the writing. We were finishing designing the cover and trying to choose an image for the cover. And I was at dinner with 4 of the McKinney kids in Raleigh one night, and I had my computer, and I was showing them a few of the pictures we were considering. And I had gotten some pictures from the archive in Raleigh. It was old N&O photos, and so they hadn't seen all of them. Some of them had not even run in the N&O, but they were in these archives. And I flashed up this photo. It's hard to see, but you can come see it afterwards. And it's Bones with a big smile with his hat on. And the McKinney kids all went, and they'd never seen it before. And their reaction was evidence that was all we needed to know that that was the picture that needed to be on the cover. And in fact, when I got home that night, I had an email from his daughter, Kitty. And the email said, "Please, please, please use that picture of Daddy with that big smile and that hat on." And it was such a nice confirmation. But it got me thinking about Bones and all the hats that he wore during his time as a player and as a coach and as a broadcaster and a public speaker and all the things he did in the state. So I don't have a lot of time, and there's so many stories. I mean, I think Charles alluded to the fact that just the jokes and the one-liners and the stories could keep you busy for a while. So they're in the book, and I don't have time for much, but I do want to talk about a few of the hats that Bones wore during his time and in which he was a great ambassador for basketball and for the state of North Carolina. The first I'm going to call the Clown Prince of Basketball. And this was actually a title that was given to Bones McKinney when he was a high school student. He played for a legendary high school team called the Durham High Bulldogs from 1938 to 1940. And many believe this was the best high school basketball team in the history of the state. They won 69 straight games in the times when Bones played there. And they were so dominant that many of the teams from the state wouldn't play them at all, so they had to travel up and down the eastern seaboard playing state championship teams from other states, which they dispatched all of those. Well, they went to a state champion tournament up in New York in 1940, so it was teams from all over, state champion teams from all over, and they won that tournament. A player named Bob Gant, great player, who went on to play at Duke, won the MVP of that tournament, but they had a special trophy for Bones that they had made, and it was called the Clown Prince of Basketball. And from that, a legacy was born of a player who was absolutely crazy on the court. Many of you remember, if you watched him coach or have heard stories, he carried on like nobody has ever carried on. Messing with refs, eating from a fan's popcorn bucket, You name it, he did it. And just always had something going. He was so colorful. And he said he never planned anything. It wasn't like he scripted it out, but all this, you know, comic ability that he had, and he was so quick on his feet, and all the adrenaline of a game, it combined for him to just put on a show. And I do believe that in an era when basketball wasn't really chief among, you know, sports in the national consciousness, in the 40s and 50s it was really baseball, boxing, tennis. Basketball was sort of up and coming, but many people didn't regard it very highly. And I think Bones helped put people in the seats because they wanted to know what he was going to do next. He had an amazing path. And going back to that Durham High team, I love to tell that his high school coach, Paul Sykes, figured out pretty quickly that he had an asset in Bones, both as a player and as this guy who could kind of get the fans on his side or get in the opponent's heads or drive the ref a little crazy. And so Paul Sykes would say, Bones, get out there and get something started. And Bones said, that's all I needed to hear. The next thing you know, I might have been playing trombone in the band. From those beginnings, he just kept going as the Clown Prince of basketball and as the player and then the coach at Wake Forest who could always get something going. He had a really interesting path. He played after high school at Durham High. He went to NC State, much to everyone's surprise, because the rest of that starting lineup went to Duke, which was right down the street. And after 2 seasons at State, Pearl Harbor happened. Bones was drafted, and he spent 4 years at Fort Bragg. He never went overseas. This was right in the middle of World War II. But he played basketball at Fort Bragg, tutored illiterate soldiers during the day, and played for the Fort Bragg team at night. One of the many ways in Bones' story where basketball intervened and changed his path. And so after Fort Bragg, the coaches had changed at NC State. He didn't know the new coach, but he knew the coach at North Carolina, Ben Carnival. So he went and became a Tar Heel for 1 season. And in typical Bones fashion, I like to call him the Forrest Gump of basketball because he seemed to always be in the right place where something big was happening. He was only in Chapel Hill for 5 months, but he managed to play for a national championship in 1946. They lost to Oklahoma A&M that year, but it was another great event in Bones' life. After that, he already had a wife and a baby, and he thought it was time to settle down, so he started to take a desk job at Haynes Hosiery. And anyone who knew Bones would say Bones at a desk job is probably unimaginable. But he was about to do the responsible thing when suddenly a professional basketball league sprung up in the Northeast. And he got a phone call from an unknown coach, Irish guy who was about to take a high school coaching job named Red Auerbach. And Red asked him to come play for the Washington Capitals in the earliest NBA. Bones stayed first in Washington and then with the Boston Celtics for 6 years in that early NBA. And some of the best stories about his antics on the court come from those years. One night in St. Louis, Bones got really tired of the organist in the arena because every time one of the Capitals players would approach the foul line, he would play a funeral dirge. Oh, no. And every time one of them hit a shot or missed a shot, he would play this kind of bazoo sound on the organ. And Bones had it, so this is what he said. He said, I walked to the foul line and signaled for a timeout. I ran up into the stands, went to the organist, picked him up, and deposited him about 20 feet up in the stands. Then I admonished him with my finger, went back to the foul line, and made my shot. So that was a classic Bones. After his stint in the NBA, he was called into the ministry. And so he went to Wake Forest Seminary in tiny Wake Forest College. This is 1953, 3 years before the school moved to Winston-Salem. And he went down there to become a minister. So he was taking seminary classes, and the head coach at Wake, Murray Greason, learned that Bones McKinney was occupying a desk on his campus. And he waited for him outside the classroom one day and said, I need an assistant coach. And for the grand sum of $750 for the season, Bones became the assistant coach at Wake Forest. And so that became a 12-year relationship with the school with which he is most associated. And of course, he went on to bring them to their only Final Four and was a legendary coach in that time. So Bones was the Clown Prince, and that's what he's known for the most. A couple of the other hats that he wore that I think are important. The second is that he was a promoter of the game, and it really goes hand in hand with what I just said, but I do believe that he helped elevate the sport through his antics and through just the magnetic person he was. Life magazine came to Wake Forest in 1960 and did a 4-page photo editorial on Bones. I mean, Life magazine in 1960 was about the pinnacle of the media. But not only that, he was a great coach who knew the game, had a very high basketball IQ. And there's so many stories about this I don't have time to go into, but every player I interviewed who played for Bones, they didn't really want to talk about the clowning. They wanted to talk about what a great coach he was, how he could make adjustments at a timeout that were mind-boggling to them, and to change something he saw in an opponent to win a game. That he really knew the game. He learned from some of the best coaches through his kind of circuitous path, and he brought that to Wake Forest and helped build a winner. So that's another way that he promoted and left a legacy on the game. Bones was also a pioneer. He actually helped integrate the game of basketball in the NBA in 1950. He was a player coach with the Washington Capitals. They needed some new talent, and he saw a player named Earl Lloyd, who was playing for a college in West Virginia, a black college. He asked permission to draft Earl Lloyd, and in 1950, Earl Lloyd was one of the first 4 African-American players to come into the NBA, and had a great relationship with Bones. I got to interview Earl Lloyd. He's in great health, living in rural Tennessee, and it was such a treat. He, by the calendar, was the first of those 4 to play in a game, so he gets credit with being the player who integrated, and that was due to Bones. That was something I didn't know about him going in, and there were so many neat surprises about his story along the way. Another very important hat that Bones wore is as a family man. He was a father of 6, devoted wife of 55 years to Edna, and I also believe a second father to so many of his players. There are so many former players who said that to me, that long after they were done playing basketball, that he would check on them, write letters for them to help them get jobs, cared for them in so many ways. Even at his funeral, Jerry Steele, a former player many of you probably remember, said he was a second daddy to me. He adopted me. Jerry believes he never would have made it a month at Wake Forest without Bones, that he took him under his wing. And there's so many stories. I believe that coaches were second fathers to him in his early years, and he returned the favor by doing that for his players. And then finally, an important hat that Bones wore that many of you probably remember was as a preacher and a public speaker. How many here, especially in Hickory, ever heard him speak in person somewhere? He never met a podium he didn't like. Isn't that right, Charles? He loved to speak, spoke everywhere. He could have spoken probably for 5 figures, but he didn't like to fly. So North Carolina was the beneficiary of that. He spoke everywhere, and everyone who had ever heard him said that he was just an amazing speaker. That he had comic timing, the ability to both entertain and inspire, that he would have all these threads of different stories going and somehow bring them all back together in an unforgettable way. In fact, I always heard at the Hickory Sportsman's Club that there were times he upstaged the big name speaker that they flew in from somewhere, because Bones would always get up and close the night with a joke and apparently leave people on the floor in that. And he also preached revivals and was the preacher for a while at Boylan Heights Baptist in Raleigh. So that's another very important job he did, and behind a microphone as a broadcaster, which many of the younger generation remember him doing that with Jim Thacker and also with Billy Packer, his former player. So that's something that he continued to do. Many people remember him best as a golf partner and as a speaker behind a podium in those later years, in those years when he lived here in Hickory. And so that's a really important legacy. And Bones did so many different things to just really make his mark, I believe, on the sport of basketball, on the state of North Carolina. He loved the game, he loved people, and he was unforgettable. And in the spirit of a Bones speech, I want to leave you with one of his favorite stories, inspired by the childhood summers he spent in his tiny hometown of Lowland, North Carolina. This far west, many of you have probably never heard of Lowland. It's Greater Hoboken. Does that help you at all? I actually made my husband drive me there in the interest of good research, and it is tiny. Out down east. He only lived there for 5 years. His mother moved to Durham when he was 5 because his father had died and she needed to find work. But he returned in the summers to work with his Uncle Fred on his tobacco farm. And this is one of his favorite stories inspired by those summers. On this particular day, as he liked to tell it, Bones and his Uncle Fred were napping on the screen porch, and someone knocked on the front door. Bones' Aunt Pearl answered the door and was greeted by a traveling salesman carrying a brand new vacuum cleaner. When she opened the door, the salesman threw a handful of manure on the only rug she had. "Lady," the salesman said, "if my vacuum cleaner won't clean that up, I'll eat it." "Come on in," Aunt Pearl said. "We ain't got electricity." We are right at the verge of one. Do we want to take a question or two, or do people have to come up and ask me in person?
Yeah, you got a couple.
All right, anyone have any questions? No pressure. Okay, there's one.
How did you decide to write about coaching and athletes and all of that for your background?
My background is as a sports writer. So I've been a sports writer really since 1990, and when I graduated from college, I went into full-time newspaper work. I actually got to cover the Carolina Panthers for a couple of seasons as a beat writer in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And since I've been freelancing, which is almost 18 years, thinking about the age of my oldest child, I've gotten to continue in sports mostly. So this was a natural thing for me to kind of drift into. Yes.
Would you like to write about the Panthers now?
No, actually. To put it succinctly, I hope there'll be something to write about soon. That's a short chapter, 9 sacks. Don't get me started.
Who has published your books and where can we find them?
They are available on Amazon and in most of the Barnes & Nobles in the state. They should be in all the Barnes & Nobles in the state. I haven't, lately checked on the ones around here. I also obviously have some here today. And the publisher is Whitecaps Media out of Houston. It's a small publisher. And they have a website, too, that sells.
Another character that coached here in the Carolinas for a while, Lefty Drizel, is he on your radar for
he is.
future book?
He is a little bit. It's funny you mentioned that because I'm friends with Ann and Terry Holland in Greenville. Terry was the athletic director at ECU, and they're very close to Lefty. And he's one of the only ones I can think of still around that inspires some comparisons to Bones and the way he acted on the court. There's nobody today. We've corporatized and buttoned up this sport a little too much, and I don't know that we've left room for that kind of comic relief. It's a shame. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the
Beth, we'd like to give you this little plaque with a four-way test on there. It's what we do as Rotarians, and hope that you'll remember that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and it's all true. If I was surprised that not everybody raised their hand that had seen Bones, and so you are the unlucky ones. I was really fortunate because I was growing up in Cary when he was there, and so I got to see him in high school a lot. He came to speak at our high school athletic banquets, and then lucky enough to be here when he was here. And without question, folks. Without question. And one of the great things was he was telling about being in a basketball game, the scoreboard goes out, and they go up and down and they play, keep playing. And Lou Bello, one of his big nemesis, was the referee, and he asked Lou, he said, what's the score, Lou? And Lou says, we got you by 2. I'll be here all night. Okay. Remember to pick up your tickets over here. Donna has the tickets for you. Remember, we have a board meeting. Come on up, Dave. Board meeting on the 18th, and sign up for the bell ring. Okay. Serve for a self-scholarship. Remember the coins in the Alzheimer's Research Trust bucket, please.
Do I need to read this? Okay, because I don't have my glasses on.
All right, President Dave, in today's education raffle, we have 27 cards left. That's about half of them. 1 joker. The take today was $100, and total is $17.97. All right, the winning ticket is 544706.
It's not there. 4 diamonds. Okay. Free lunch. Okay, lots of guests here. Floyd, Steve, Jay, and Mark. Thanks for making up here today. And Steve, Cheryl, Amy, Marina, Elaine, Holly, Jim, and Donna. Great to have all of you. Hope you'll come back soon. Any other announcements or anything else? Okay, if you'll rise for the 4-way test. For the things we think, say, and do is the truth. Is fair to all concerned. Will build goodwill and better friendships. Will be beneficial to all concerned.